we see there's more independent stores I see coming to the market versus franchise. What's your opinion on either? Which one, if there is a better answer? Maybe they're the same.
I think that the reason you're seeing that is because the barrier to entry for franchise stores has really increased in recent years in terms of the franchise fees and the net worth requirements to break into the business. Where I think 20, 30 years ago, there was a lower barrier to entry. Now I think you've seen that really increase. And so, but I think the answer of what's better still kind of depends on the person, right? If you're brand new to the industry and you need to learn how to run this operation right, maybe the franchise model is best because you're going to have a ton of support. If you're in the independent store business, then I think what it does is it really does enhance the value proposition of partnering with somebody like me in my business.
Building a legacy starts with the bold decision to take a leap of faith. Behind every empire lies a foundation of grit, willpower, and the courage to take big risks. Welcome to Entrepreneurship Unlocked, where world shakers in the business world gather to share their stories. We're diving deep into the mindset of the modern entrepreneur to show you exactly what it takes to become truly unlocked. Join us in the pursuit of excellence with your host, Seth Rudin. This is Entrepreneurship Unlocked.
Welcome. Thank you for joining our podcast. This is Seth Rudin. I'm a senior business broker with IBA, and I have the opportunity to interview a great professional in our state of Washington, and I'm going to let Bryan Elliott introduce himself.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Seth, for having me here today. I think this is a great opportunity. I've gotten to know a little bit about what IBA does and the opportunities that it helps present to people who are growing businesses and being entrepreneurs in our state. So I think that's fantastic. So a little bit about me. So I am the owner and operator of Stuart Range Consulting, which is a independent business consulting company focused really on the C-store, mini market, gas station space. And I've got some pretty extensive background with probably the biggest name in the C-store industry, and that is 7-Eleven. I worked for them as a business consultant for a number of years, and I had a really good view into how does a company at scale, that really at international scale, run and operate effective convenience store businesses. And so from that experience, I was able to go out on my own. I started Stuart Range Consulting. I do a lot of work with some of my old franchisee clients at 7-Eleven, really helping them both focus on their inventory and their financial controls, but also grow the operations in their store and make them more efficient. But I'm really loving this opportunity to break into the private store space as well. And a lot of my clients also have private stores. They have other convenience stores. I think that it's truly a really fascinating part of the industry. It gets to the heart of like American ingenuity and entrepreneurship is running your own convenience store, working with your hands every day, serving customers. I think it's a great part of the American business experience. And so I'm loving that.
And how did you come up with the name Stuart Range?
So I'm from Ellensburg, Washington, which many people would know. If you drive on I-90 and you come down into the big valley with the windmills, you'll see that's Ellensburg right there, right? But right after you come out of Snoqualmie Pass. If you're coming towards Spokane, so you're going east, sometimes they're hard to pick up on. But if you're going west, the big mountains to the north that you see is the Stuart Range. And so Mount Stuart is the most prominent of that. I grew up in the valley. It's kind of like the dominating feature. And I think it's a really cool piece of geography. I also like to hike as well. And so I've hiked that mountain before. It was probably one of the most physically challenging things I've ever done, just because it's a long walk to just get there in the first place, not to mention the actual climb itself. So,
and you're humble. You haven't talked about yet your former Army vet. And you're in the National Guard.
Yep. So I've got 12 years in the Army at this point. About 6 of that was spent on active duty, which includes a deployment back in 2019, 2020. And then I've done 6 years of a traditional Guard experience. I've held command roles of what we call a maneuver troop, so a cavalry troop that's dedicated towards facilitating reconnaissance for like bigger elements. And now I'm in a operations officer role, and so I oversee a schoolhouse that focuses on officer training and warrant officer training. So the Army's been a really good experience. There's not a lot of direct parallels to the ins and outs and the details of the convenience store. But I will say from a leadership perspective, in terms of building a successful culture and building teams and setting goals and driving towards metrics and initiatives that really grow the overall profitability of the business, there are huge synergies between what the military does and what the military trains and what we can apply to growing successful businesses.
That's great. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just real quick, I'm Seth Rudin. I help the owners of privately held companies or family-owned businesses make an exits. I mean, valuing your business, finding your buyer, and then helping you negotiate the sale of it all the way through to the end. We've been in business since 1975, and we've closed over 4,400 businesses.
It's fantastic.
Oregon, Washington, we get to work on some projects together, whether it's in Washington or Oregon. It's been fantastic working with you.
Yeah.
And my clients have all said great things so far, and I expect nothing else to go into the future.
Thanks, sir.
Let's dig into this a little bit.
Yeah.
I know you touched on what you do, but maybe share a couple of services and projects about Stuart Range Consulting so my audience can understand a little bit better, and then we'll dig into your 7-Eleven after that.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of specific to what we can do for private stores is really looking at, from an objective external perspective, how can we leverage what we know about the trends in the industry, the trends in our customers, using market research regarding just the neighborhood and the community to really get the most out of what you're putting into every day for operations, right? It's like anything else. There's only a certain number of hours in the day. There's only certain hours that you're going to be open. There's only a certain number of people that are going to walk through that door. So how can you really drive the most value out of them? And so a lot of my work with private stores is going to focus on the gross profit opportunity, right? Because we can get customers into our door and we can get them to buy a pack of cigarettes. But if they're just buying that pack of cigarettes, we know that the margins on that are so tight that if they spill a cup of coffee on the way out, you're probably losing money on the time it took to clean up that cup of coffee, then head out the door. And so how can we really leverage the other products in our store, the merchandising opportunities, to make the store, instead of just a quick stop to pack, to buy my case of beer or my pack of cigarettes, but to really have a fresh food experience, to have a hot or cold beverage experience, to get my snacks, right, if I'm heading to a job site. And really what we can do is we can look at the traffic patterns, who's coming in the store, what are the opportunities, and what's not being served in the community to really drive the highest value out of every customer that we bring in.
That's excellent. So you're going to bring value, help them merchandise better in summary, and really understand their costs.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's emerging initiatives too. So one thing that we know and that I learned with my experience at 7-Eleven is the value of digital and digital delivery, right? Grubhub, DoorDash, Uber Eats. There's a lot of programs now where, the big chains are doing it, but these independent stores can pick up on delivery opportunities. And we're seeing things like, 25 to 30% of some stores' total sales is now coming from the delivery side.
Is this in the hot food or in the cold dry food?
It tends to skew towards higher margin products. People usually don't do their cigarettes and their tobacco on the delivery order, so it cuts that part out, but they're doing more fresh food. They're doing a lot of things from what we call the vault, the non-alcoholic, the Pepsis, the sodas, the energy drinks, all those sort of products, which means that even when you factor in the fees for the delivery, because sometimes there's a fee sharing, sometimes you can push all the fees onto the customer. It just kind of depends on what model you want to pursue. But let's even say you're sharing in some of those fees, you're still going to probably realize a higher gross profit on the delivery and participating in that than you would just on your normal in-store sales.
Curious, interesting point. I never really thought about using my app to order something from a convenience store. I'm guessing
you can do it.
It's around a sporting event or a holiday or some
I think
they don't want to get out of the house and leave a party or something.
I think weather driven too, right? The C-store industry is very weather susceptible. In the colder season or even on rainy days, you really see those dips and spikes in those sales, right? As opposed to your sunny and your warm days where people want to get out of the house. This is a way to capture those customers even when they're not going to get out on the road. A day like, yesterday in Ellensburg, when we had, it snowed all day and it was kind of a mess. You can get those customers to still basically shop your stores in a digital sense.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
You had a long career at one of the biggest well-known brands, 7-Eleven. Almost every corner. When I grew up in Phoenix, had a 7-Eleven. You come up here and I still see 7-Eleven. So tell me about that experience. How did you help these store owners?
Well, I have no regrets about the time that I spent at 7-Eleven. 7-Eleven is a fantastic company. I mean, they've been in business almost 100 years now, and there's a reason for that too. And they continue to grow and grow. I think the biggest growth that they've experienced in recent years is they had an acquisition of Speedway, which took their store profile in the United States to, I think, somewhere around 20,000. And internationally, they're like at 70 or 80,000 stores.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. And so huge value in that company to be found in terms of learning thinking about what makes this business successful, and then what are some of the pitfalls too. So I was hired by 7-Eleven to basically do the field consulting work, to work directly with franchisees. I was trained by them in this business, and then I would say I got a second round of training, right? Because you get your training in sort of the corporate environment, and then you get out and you start working with stores, and you see the real ins and outs of what we deal with every day in the industry. And so I got to have that experience. A lot of challenges. I was with them through COVID, so I was with them through some significant delivery disruptions, which then led to some really significant paperwork and inventory disruptions, because what wholesalers were saying was delivered was not necessarily delivered. And so there's a lot of work to be done with the distributors and the vendors to reconcile that stuff. So I got to be a part of that. I got to be a part of really the growth and the expansion of what I talked about with the digital delivery business. That's really taken off. During my time, we had a pretty cool independent cold beverage initiative that was focused on a lot of the coffee stands around here. They sell these energy drinks, right? Yeah. They put some, flavored syrups into them. They're wildly popular, especially with younger generations, right? Convenience stores have a hard time competing with that if you're just selling coffee, even flavored coffee and that kind of stuff. Even if you have the best, the Frankie 8000 machine that does the fresh grind, you're not competing with the energy drinks. And so being with 7-Eleven at that time, we were able to identify that opportunity and actually create a program in the stores where folks could buy their energy drink and then pour it into like a cup and then use the split flavored syrups to make their own with a markup on top of it. So you get the margin from the actual energy drink, which is pretty healthy already. And then everything else, it's just basically cost of goods. So, you're selling these products now for 50-60% margin, and you're competing directly with those independent coffee stands. So really good learning opportunities and innovation during my years there.
Would expand that and bring that to everybody, independents and other branded stores, maybe even grocery stores down the road.
Absolutely. Yeah. So huge opportunity.
I'm sure you've seen a lot of different things when you're talking to convenience stores and gas owners. What are the biggest mistakes that you've observed?
Yeah, I think that running a convenience store, and anybody who's listened to this, who's had this experience, is going to know exactly what I'm saying. It is not for the faint of heart. It is a tough business, right? Especially if you're truly running it as a 24/7 or a close to 24/7 operation. It is a difficult thing to do. I can tell you from a military perspective, 24-hour operations, even if it's just, normal day-to-day stuff, is very, very difficult to do because you always have to be on and paying attention. And so I think sometimes our biggest challenge, or the biggest challenge that I see out there, is that I see folks who get so stuck into the day-to-day of, hey, I've just got to fill a ship. I've got to get a person to stand at my cash register and ring up the customer, that we lose sight of the growth part, right? It's how can I get through every single day? And it's not how am I growing my business? What new products am I offering? What merchandising opportunities do I have? What controls am I implementing? If I get so focused on just filling staff in a store, I might lose the opportunity to take a look at what is my shrink. Am I losing products out of the store? Do I have an opportunity to reduce my cost of sales and protect my business a little bit? And so there's all these things out there that I think sometimes, the good people who are doing the work can lose sight of. It's very easy to do that. And so that's why having an independent outside perspective come in and take a look at those things and then build an action plan to get there can be really valuable.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And then I'm just curious, you see all these trends. When I used to go into 7-Elevens or Jackson's or whatever, there wasn't that many hot food. Now I see hot food. So I'm curious, what are the trends that you're seeing?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, because the fresh food business is the future of the convenience store. Again, going back to what I said earlier about the cigarettes and the tobacco, the margins are just not there, right? And you start adding in the taxes, the regulations. I think it was Multnomah County, Oregon has I think they have flavor bans on their cigarettes now, which means you can't even do like menthol cigarettes. And so it is just getting so restrictive out there that, there's not going to be a lot of space to grow that. It'll always be a cornerstone of the business, but it's not going to grow. And so how do you supplement that? One of the best ways you can do it is through fresh food offerings, because fresh food offerings by their nature are high margin. You get a roller grill in there, and roller grills don't always do as well as independent stores. I think there's opportunity there. I think there's some lessons we can take from the big chains to make that successful. But a roller grill, 60% margin is pretty standard for the products coming off of it, right? You get chicken wings, pizza, 40-50%, very, very healthy margins coming off of that. And so bang for your buck in terms of what you're purchasing and the labor you're putting into can be very, very successful. And nobody's going to come in your store and just buy a single slice of pizza. If they're there and they're buying a slice of pizza, they're going to get their chips. They're going to go and they're going to get an energy drink. They're going to get a cup of coffee.
Absolutely.
You drive the basket.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's why fresh food is growing. I know that some of the bigger chains are even leaning even more into it. They're leaning into like restaurant experiences, which I think hasn't fully borne fruit yet. They're still kind of experimenting with what that looks like, but they're trying, right? Because they realize how important fresh fresh food is. And when you see these big companies pouring billions of dollars into restaurants and fresh food programs, everybody should take notice and realize that is the future. The market research is there.
When I go get my gas on my way to Portland, I stop off at exit 72.
Yeah.
I do get 2 or 3 things. Like you said, I get my gas and I'll go get something to eat and I got something to wash it down.
There you go.
Drink, right?
Yeah.
And I got to stay awake for my rest of my drive.
So I mean, why not? You got to get your energy, your coffee.
And it's the hot food that brings me in, right?
Yeah, it's fantastic.
We see there's more independent stores I see coming to the market versus franchise. What's your opinion on either? Which one, if there is a better answer? Maybe they're the same. I don't know.
I think it depends. I think that the reason you're seeing that is because the barrier to entry for franchise stores has really increased in recent years in terms of the franchise fees and the net worth requirements to break into the business, where I think 20, 30 years ago, kind of across the whole industry, not just 7-Eleven, there was a lower barrier to entry. Now I think you've seen that really increase. And so folks have to make a choice now and say, well, if I'm going to invest this amount of capital and I've got to have this net worth anyways, I might as well just keep all my money. I'm not paying anybody a royalty fee every month. And so I think that that's the reason that we're seeing that. But I think the answer of what's better still kind of depends on the person, right? If you're brand new to the industry and you need to learn how to run this operation, right? Maybe the franchise model is best because you're going to have a ton of support, right? You're already paying for somebody like me if you're a franchise store because that you're going to have a field operations team. And so I think that can be really useful. If you're in the independent store business or you choose to go that route, then I think what it does is it really does enhance the value proposition of partnering with somebody like me in my business, right? Where we can take those lessons from big store. You don't have to pay the royalty fee every month, and you can pay, for a reasonable price. You can pay and understand and get the lessons from the big chains.
What about, can they get the purchasing power through associations or
you do have
coalitions?
You do have some reduced purchasing power than if you're working with 7-Eleven. But I think that is also kind of equalized too, is what I've seen. Is I think in the past the leverage that big chains had with the vendors and the distributors was a lot more. What I observed and experienced firsthand was, hey, join the club. There's a lot of other stores that we service, and we're going to treat everybody fairly and equally. I saw that a lot during COVID with beer deliveries. It was the parent company. It's called Constellation. Constellation is the parent company for Modelo. Modelo is a huge beer
company
out in
and then Diego bought them.
Yeah. So in Central and Eastern Washington, Modelo is a big.
That's my favorite beer.
Okay, there you go. Right.
You want to make me happy? Bring me a Negro beer. With a lime.
I'm gonna remember that.
Yes.
But back in 2021, you probably couldn't get it. They had huge out of stock and supply issues. And I remember directly talking to the distributor, which was, I think, Columbia. And they were like, look, we realize who you are in your 7-Eleven, but we service, X number of other stores, independent, other chains. We've got to treat everybody with fairness. At the time that was difficult for me to hear. But now that I stand on this side, I'm like, that's a really fair position. So I think the distributors have kind of changed their mindset too. So I don't think the difference is as stark as maybe it used to be.
But I know, like, there's a tire chain that we sold, and the owners, they could be their own store, but they had purchasing power because they would buy the tires together.
Sure.
And then allocate it to the store, right?
You do get some discounts from that perspective.
That's awesome. Curious, do gas station owners, do they have that leverage in trying to make the sale of gas more profitable, or are they just stuck to what the market is?
That's really contract driven. And so if there's anybody out there that knows of an easy lever to pull, please let me know, because I'd love to share that value with the rest of my clients. But I haven't seen a lot of levers. But what I will say is there is a lever to drive gas customers into your store. You said it yourself, right? Exit 72. So we got to think about the things about how do we draw Seth and more customers like him into our store, and how do we keep him there so that he buys all the things that he needs and maybe even some stuff he doesn't need so that he's ready for his day. And so that's a huge part of the business that I think sometimes we miss. I mean, I do know of independent stores that are very, very busy gas stations. And then you look at their inside sales and they are a fraction, maybe 10% of what I would expect to see from that volume of a similar size big chain, right? And so what can we do to make that storefront more attractive? What can we do with signage? What can we do with merchandising? What can we do with in-store promotions and stuff to really draw those customers in and make them feel comfortable, and then show them that they're getting a value? And why would you make a second stop later down the road?
I see these gas stations, they got a convenience store and they got gas, but they got 2 bays for auto repair.
Wonderful, yeah.
And usually those are not the ones I want to go in, but if they had just changed the facade of it,
right,
been more inviting.
Right, better signage, better lighting. There's a huge thing. And then one shout out I'll make to 7-Eleven is they have a huge focus on cleanliness.
Yeah.
And, sometimes it can feel challenging because just the amount of traffic that goes into a convenience store, limited staff and all those things. But if we can develop an action plan to keep a store clean, in stock, inviting and welcoming to the customer, the dividends that pays over time are just tremendous.
Yeah,
truly.
Totally sense.
Yeah.
Going into a store, you got a brand new client. What are maybe share the top 3 things that you're looking for when you're going to say, hey, how can I improve this?
Yeah. Well, the very first thing that I would say is what we just hit on, right? Is the store inviting to the customer? And so typically what I do when I visit a store is I'm going to do a store walk. It's very similar to the ones that I conducted with 7-Eleven. It starts with the exterior, right? When you first walk up and you look at that store facade and you say, how does the lighting look? Is all the equipment functioning, right? You might have a self-service tire air pump machine, but it's been out of order for 6 months. At that point, why do we even have it, right? And what message is that sending to the customer? I look at bathrooms. I look at, does it have public restrooms? And not all stores should have public restrooms. I'm the first to say that, but there are some stores that should, right? They're in the right locations for that sort of traffic inside the store when you walk in, right? Does it feel clean? Does it smell clean? And it's an up to down approach, right? You can look across and look at all the counters and surfaces. Usually those are pretty clean because people wipe those every single day. You gotta look up at the ceilings, the dust. Is there dust up there? The top of the shelves too, right? Is dust accumulated there? Are the shelves front face? Does it look like there's the tags have been maintained? If they have tags, some independent stores don't because they use the vendor tags order and stuff. But if it does have price tags, are those being maintained? What does that look like? And then you got to look at the merchandising too, right? Are there promotions in the store that are still profitable and make sense for the business owner? And we can do a lot of analysis to figure out what that looks like, but that provide value to the customer. Where they say, this is now my go-to destination. This is the place I'm buying my Monster Energies and my, hot dog from the roller grill and my candy bar for the day. And so there's merchandising, and then we've got to look at expanding beyond that, which is the innovation, right? Does it have a delivery program? And if it doesn't, is there an opportunity for that? Do they have ice cream?
Yeah.
Right? Is there an ice cream parlor anywhere nearby? Or do they have a captive audience that doesn't have an ice cream solution, especially in the warm weather months? Look at tourist locations, right? High traffic flow for places that, get those summer folks coming in.
Take care of those kids on the ride home.
Gotta have, novelty case or fresh ice cream, right? There's a lot of different opportunities out there. And then we can transition to the back end too, right? What do the financial controls look like? What do the cash controls at the POS look like? What does the inventory management system look like? How are we maintaining our inventory? And what do those processes look like? And then what are the opportunities to reduce our expenses and our cost of business relative to overall sales to drive increased profitability? That's sort of like the process I would go through, but I would say that covers, the traits and all the things that I'm going to be looking for. I think maybe the last thing I would add too is engaged ownership. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to have somebody who's in the store on a day-to-day basis. There are very, very successful stores who have owners who have other businesses and who have hired good leadership. But the engagement part is understanding who your people are, holding them accountable. And from both my corporate background, but also with the military, I'm definitely a big believer in leadership development and people development. I'm happy to assist with those things as well.
Bryan, I have to say that very comprehensive. It's the same feedback that my clients tell me. They love meeting Bryan. They help him out. All it takes is one little tidbit to drive a half a point or a point of margin, and that can be a lot of money across the course of a year. I really appreciate the time to interview you and get to know you better, both working in this and fantastic. How do people contact you?
Yeah, so best way to get a hold of me, well, if you're already working with Seth, which I would strongly recommend, you can definitely reach out to Seth and we can get in touch that way. You can also email me, which is Stuart Range Consulting. So Stuart is spelled S-T-U-A-R-T, Stuart Range, like a mountain range, consulting at gmail.com, or just call me directly on my phone. I'm super available, 509-929-5060. Love to talk and love to see what opportunities we have to help grow your business and increase profitability.
Very good. Thank you. And you can reach me if you need to sell your business. Seth Rudin. I'm on LinkedIn and I'm also on YouTube where you'll find this video. That's a Deal Maker is my channel. Thank you very much. Have a great day. We'll see you next time.